They told me I was chosen for honor, but honor doesn't come bound in chains of expectation, dressed in white, as if for a wedding that isn't one. Honor doesn't taste like ash on the tongue, doesn't feel like exile wrapped in silk. I knew the truth before anyone spoke it aloud. I was not chosen for honor. I was chosen for sacrifice. The treaty between our packs was fragile, so thin it could tear with a single breath. Years of raids and bloodshed had left too many graves on both sides, and the elders whispered that only a bride could stitch the wounds closed. Not a bride of choice, but an offering. Someone disposable enough to be given away. Someone like me. "My daughter will be remembered," my father said, his hand heavy on my shoulder as if to press me into the earth. "Her name will mean peace." But I knew what my name meant. It meant surrender. The night before I left, I walked the borders of our land, memorizing the sound of the pines and the way the wind carried the scent of river water. I had grown up here, among people who now would not meet my eyes. They avoided me, not from pity but relief. It wasn't them. It wasn't their daughters. When dawn came, they draped me in pale robes and silver chains that clinked with every step. Symbols of unity, they said. Shackles, I thought. The northern citadel rose out of the mountains like a fortress carved by gods. Black stone walls jagged against the sky, spires crowned with banners that snapped in the bitter wind. The closer we rode, the smaller I felt, as if the citadel could swallow me whole and leave nothing of the girl who had once laughed barefoot in river mud. Inside, it smelled of smoke and iron. Guards in dark armor lined the halls, their faces carved from stone. None looked at me, none needed to. I was not here to be seen. I was here to be placed like a pawn on a board already blood-stained. They led me to a chamber at the heart of the citadel. The floor was black marble, veined with silver. The ceiling so high my voice echoed when I dared to whisper a prayer. At the far end sat the throne of the Northern Alpha King, empty for now, but soon to be filled by the man who would decide whether I became ornament, servant, or prisoner. I tried not to tremble, though the weight of silence pressed on me. My escorts bowed and withdrew, leaving me alone in the cavernous hall. Every story I had heard of the Alpha King painted him as a monster. He was said to rule with an iron fist, his dominance so absolute that even the air bent to his will. Mothers frightened children into obedience by whispering his name in the dark. And now, I was his to command. The doors creaked open. Boots echoed against stone. I lifted my chin, though my knees wanted to give way. This was my fate, written by treaties and signed in blood, not my own. I was the peace offering, the sacrifice disguised as a bride. And though my heart pounded against its cage, I whispered a vow to myself that no elder had written into the treaty. If they send me as prisoner, I will not break as prisoner. If they send me as sacrifice, I will learn to live as something more, power, but still, I feared. Because every step that echoed toward me reminded me that soon I would stand before the Alpha King of the North, and I did not yet know if he would see me as a peace offering or as prey. The moment the throne room doors closed behind me, the whispers began. They thought I couldn't hear them, but my ears caught every poisoned word. Hostage, spoils of war, bargaining chip. One voice, sharper than the rest, muttered traitor to her blood. Each word landed like a pebble thrown at glass, small but steady, trying to crack me open. I kept my head high. The pale robes they'd wrapped me in fluttered around my ankles, too light for the mountain cold, but I refused to shiver. If I showed weakness now, they would feed on it like wolves circling a wounded deer. The Council of the North sat in half-circle rows behind the empty throne, their robes trimmed with fur and their eyes sharp as knives. Warriors leaned against the walls, armored and restless, like they'd rather be on a battlefield than standing guard over me. None looked at me with welcome. I was not a bride to them. I was an object, a token of treaty, a living reminder that my pack had bent the knee. One of the counselors, a narrow-faced man with cold eyes, leaned toward the elder beside him. Process. She looks too small to be of any use, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. The king should have demanded a daughter with stronger blood. Another chuckled. Perhaps she'll make a fine servant, or at least a distraction until he finds a proper mate. Heat burned in my cheeks, but I forced myself to meet their stares. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. They can strip you of everything, but never let them strip you of your spine. So I straightened, hands clasped before me, though my fingernails dug crescents into my palms. Do you think she understands us? A warrior near the door asked with a sneer. Or is she too simple, too meek? I understand enough, I said, my voice low but steady. The words bounced against the marble like they belonged here, even if I did not. A sneer faltered. A few heads turned. Silence rippled through the chamber, not out of respect but out of surprise. They hadn't expected me to answer. They hadn't expected me to have a voice at all. For a fleeting moment, I tasted something like victory. Small, fragile, but mine. The counselor, with the narrow face, smiled thinly, as if my defiance pleased him in the way one might enjoy watching a fly struggle against a spider's web. Ah, she has a tongue after all. Let us see if she dares use it when the king arrives. More laughter followed, cruel and sharp. But I clung to the thought that silence would be worse, that if I let them laugh and never once spoke back, I would already be broken before the Alpha King ever saw me. They could mock me, strip me of titles, call me hostage, bargaining chip, traitor, but I would not bow in spirit. I thought of my village, of the way the river had frozen solid in winter, of how the women would crack the ice to reach water, their hands raw and bleeding, but they never stopped. They endured because they had no other choice. And I realized I was no different. I was not strong in the way these warriors measured strength, not built of muscle or sharpened claws. But endurance was a kind of power too. Survival was a kind of defiance. So I stood there in their cold chamber, robe clinging to me like mist, spine straight, chin lifted. They could dress me as a bride, or dismiss me as a prisoner, but I knew who I was. I was not honor. I was not sacrifice. I was something they did not yet understand. And if they thought they could break me with whispers and humiliation, they had forgotten what happens when you put pressure on glass. Sometimes it shatters. But sometimes it becomes a diamond. The air in the throne room shifted before I ever saw him. One moment, the chamber buzzed with cruel laughter and whispers meant to pierce me. The next, silence fell like a blade. Warriors stiffened. Counselors rose from their seats in unison. Even the banners on the walls seemed to hold their breath. The doors opened, and he entered. Alpha King, Lysander, Valdris. The stories hadn't been lies. If anything, they had been too small to contain him. He moved like a storm, given flesh tall, broad-shouldered, every line of him carved with power. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, falling in waves that framed a face both brutally handsome and terrifying. But it was his eyes that rooted me in place, silver, cold as winter moonlight, yet burning with something older than time itself. I could feel it, the sheer weight of his dominance pressing against my skin. It was not just his size, not just the muscle or the scars peeking from his collar. It was the way the very air bent to him. Every wolf in that chamber lowered their head instinctively, their bodies bowing to a will too strong to resist. Except mine. I wanted to. My body screamed at me to kneel, to bare my throat, to submit. But something stubborn, reckless, maybe even suicidal held me upright. My chin lifted, though my heart raced so hard I thought it might break free from my chest. His gaze swept the hall, disinterested, commanding. Then it landed on me, and the world stilled. For 3 long heartbeats, he did nothing, just stared. I thought I saw his nostrils flare slightly, as though scenting the air, but his expression remained unreadable. "She is the offering," one of the counselors finally said, breaking the silence. His voice wavered in the stillness. "Sent from the southern borderlands as part of the treaty. A token, nothing more. A hostage," another added. "Useful for now, disposable later." The king's silver eyes never left mine. His voice, when it came, rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. "A hostage?" The counselor faltered. "Yes, Your Majesty, for safe peace between our pacts." Lysander moved then, crossing the expanse of black marble with unhurried steps, each one echoing like a drumbeat. I could not breathe. When he reached me, he stopped so close I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. His presence was overwhelming, a tidal force crashing over me. "This woman," he said, his tone deceptively calm, "is not a hostage." A ripple of confusion swept the chamber. "Your Majesty, the treaty. She will not be a prisoner." He cut them off, his voice sharp enough to slice steel. I braced myself for the next words, for the chains, the humiliation, the stripping of whatever dignity I had left. Instead, his pronouncement rang like a strike of lightning, Pardias. "She will be my mate." Gasps erupted around us. Warriors exchanged startled glances. Counselors stumbled to their feet. Even my own breath caught in my throat. Mate? I felt my body sway, as if the ground had tilted beneath me. My pack had sent me here as a lamb for slaughter, expecting me to be shackled in a dungeon or paraded as a trophy. Instead, the Alpha King had claimed me not as prisoner, but as equal, or at least, as something closer to equal than anyone had imagined. "Impossible," one elder stammered, face pale. "An Omega from a border village." "I did not ask for your judgment," Lysander said, his tone colder than the mountain snows outside. He turned, addressing the entire hall. "Hear me clearly. She will not rot in a cell. She will not be dismissed as bargaining token. She will stand at my side, under my protection, under my bond." I heard it then, the low growl rumbling through the gathered wolves. Not all approved. Some sounded furious, others fearful. My heart hammered in my ribs, but still I did not look away from him. I should have felt relief, safety, gratitude. Instead, I felt trapped by a new kind of chain. Because being the Alpha King's prisoner would have been one kind of death, being his mate promised something far more complicated. He faced me again, silver eyes, unreadable. "Do you understand, little Omega? From this moment, no one touches you without my leave. No one commands you but me." The words were both shield and shackle. My pulse thundered in my ears. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Why?" Something flickered in his gaze, surprise maybe, or amusement. Then it was gone, replaced by that same storm-born calm. "Because," he said simply, "I decided it." The chamber fell silent again, every soul bowing to the king's will. And I realized with a shiver that whatever fate awaited me, it would no longer be defined by treaties or councils. It would be defined by him. The Alpha King. My mate. My captor. My only shield in a world that wanted me broken. I expected chains. When they led me from the throne room after Lysander's declaration, I braced myself for iron shackles and a cell buried somewhere in the bowels of the citadel. That was what I had prepared for: humiliation, confinement, a slow wasting away as my pack boasted of peace while I vanished into silence. But the path did not descend into darkness. It climbed higher. We passed through archways of black marble veined with gold, climbed staircases lit with braziers that burned with white fire. The air grew warmer, the floors lined with carpets soft enough to swallow my steps. When the guards opened a pair of massive doors, I stumbled to a halt. The royal wing. It was not a prison. It was a palace within a fortress. Ceilings soared higher than the tallest trees of my homeland. Windows stretched from floor to roof, showing me all of the northern territories at once, the forests stretching endless, and the mountains biting at the clouds. Chandeliers of wrought iron and crystal blazed with candlelight. And the chambers, gods, the chambers, a sitting room large enough for my entire village. A bathing chamber with steaming pools of scented water, a bed so vast it could have swallowed me whole. I stood frozen, unable to reconcile what I saw with what I had expected. "This will be your domain," Lysander's voice came from behind me. I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway, arms folded across his chest, silver eyes watching me as though I were a puzzle he intended to solve. "Domain?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You thought I'd chain you to stone, didn't you?" His mouth curved not quite a smile, not quite mockery, something sharper. "That's what your pack told you." I said nothing. The silence was answer enough. Lysander stepped into the chamber, his boots soundless on the carpet. "You are not my prisoner, Kestrel. You are my mate. If you walk these halls, no one will stop you. If you give orders to the attendants, they will obey." He gestured, and a pair of women emerged from a side door, bowing their heads. "Food, clothing, books, anything you want. This wing is yours." The attendant's eyes flickered toward me, curiosity, pity, maybe fear. Then back to the king. My heart beat fast and uneven. Freedom of movement, attendance, comfort beyond anything I'd ever dreamed. I should have felt relief, gratitude, even, but I couldn't shake the unease coiling in my stomach. "Why?" I asked finally. "Why what? Why give me this? Why not keep me where you can forget me?" For a moment, he said nothing, just studied me, head tilted, gaze heavy as snow pressing down a mountain. "Because forgetting you is not possible." I flinched. His tone hadn't been tender. It had been clinical, as if he'd observed a fact about the weather. Unavoidable. Absolute. "You'll find," he continued, "that comfort can be its own cage. Luxury does not erase scrutiny. I will be watching." And he did. The days that followed blurred into a strange half-dream. I woke to silks instead of wool, ate food I had no name for, bathed in water, warmed by hidden fires. The attendants hovered at every breath, dressing me, brushing my hair, asking what I required. If I wished to walk the corridors, no one stopped me. Guards bowed instead of blocking my path. And yet, Lysander was everywhere. I'd find him in the library, pretending to read while his eyes tracked me. On the balcony, standing too close as the wind whipped around us. At meals, watching the way I lifted the cup to my lips, as though the angle of my wrist carried some secret. It was not cruelty. It was worse. It was study. He spoke little, asked fewer questions, but his silence was weighted, his gaze sharp enough to peel away skin. I felt as though he were waiting for something for me to break, or reveal, or confess. But what did he think I was hiding? I was no spy, no weapon, just a woman who had been sent here as an offering. And yet, at night, when I lay in the massive bed, I could still feel his eyes, as though they'd branded me even after he left the chamber. And a thought festered in the dark, one I could not silence. Perhaps he wasn't watching to find weakness. Perhaps he was watching to see if I was strong enough to survive him. It did not take long for the whispers to find me. At first, they came from across the hall, carried by servants who did not think I could hear. Then from guards stationed in the corridors, their voices low, but never low enough. And finally, from counselors themselves, their disdain sharpened into words spoken directly in my presence, as if testing how much I could endure before breaking. Traitor, hostage, spy. The words curled through the citadel like smoke, seeping into every corner until even the walls seemed to hum with accusation. It was my own people who struck first. Messengers came from the border villages, men I had once known by name, who had eaten at my family's table. They refused to meet my eyes when I stepped into the council chamber beside Lysander, but their words carried the venom of betrayal. She bows to the north, one spat, wears his colors, his jewels. She forgets whose blood runs in her veins. She has chosen comfort over loyalty, another said. Our daughter given in treaty has turned consort, perhaps even queen. Their contempt was sharper than chains would have been. They had sent me here with no choice, and now they condemned me for surviving it. I wanted to scream at them that I had not chosen, that I had been handed over like grain in tribute, that every day I lived in a cage dressed as a palace. But my throat locked. My words would not matter. To them, I was already lost. The counselors of the north seized upon it like wolves scenting blood. See how quickly she changes allegiance, muttered one with a voice like gravel. No doubt she carries her pack's secrets, feeding them to our enemies. Another leaned forward, eyes glittering. She is a spy. A daughter of the South cannot be trusted in the North's bed. Their accusations spilled like water down a cliff, unstoppable, relentless, and all the while, I sat with my back straight, my hands folded, every nerve burning with shame and fury. I told myself not to flinch, not to show them the crack in my spirit they so desperately wanted to see. Through it all, Lysander said nothing. He sat at the head of the chamber, his silver eyes unreadable, his hands resting lightly on the arms of his throne. It was only when the noise reached a fever pitch that he finally spoke. Enough. A single word slammed through the chamber like a hammer. The counselors froze. The messengers from my pack lowered their eyes. Silence thickened the air. Kumsiv. She is not a hostage, Lysander said slowly, deliberately. And she is not a spy, she is mine. The possessive weight of those words rolled through me, confusing my heart. Part of me bristled at being spoken of as though I were an object, a possession. Another part, one I hated to acknowledge, found relief in it, because no one dared challenge what the Alpha King claimed as his. Yet even his protection carried its own isolation. When the chamber emptied, I lingered on the balcony overlooking the northern forests. The mountains stretched endless, crowned with snow, and for the first time I realized how far I was from the world I once knew. Even if I wanted to return home, there was no place left for me. To my people, I was traitor. To the north, I was spy. I belonged nowhere. The door creaked, and I didn't need to turn to know who it was. His presence pressed against me like the weight of a storm. You hear them, I said quietly. You hear what they call me. Yes, Kamen, and you let them. He stepped closer until the air between us seemed charged, his voice low. If they cannot see the difference between a hostage and a queen, then let them choke on their own blindness. Their whispers do not change what I have decided. Plies with thy turn then, meeting his silver gaze. And what have you decided? Calm. That you are mine, he said again. Calm. Absolute. I hated how my breath caught, how my body reacted to those words, as though they carried safety instead of danger. He was not promising kindness. He was not promising love, only protection, and even that because it pleased him to give it. I wanted to demand more. I wanted to remind him that I was flesh and soul, not just a piece on his board. But the truth lodged in my chest, heavy and unshakable. I had no allies here, none, except perhaps the Alpha King himself. And whether that made me fortunate or damned, I could not yet tell. The first time we dined alone, I expected silence. A table long enough to seat 20 stood between us, set with dishes I didn't recognize, goblets of wine dark as blood, and silver cutlery, so polished it reflected my pale face back at me. The attendants bowed and withdrew, leaving only me, the king, and the oppressive weight of expectation. I lowered my eyes to the plate before me. Venison roasted with herbs, soft bread glazed with butter, fruit so ripe they glistened like jewels. My stomach churned. I was used to simpler meals, shared around smoky hearths, not feasts served in gilded halls. He watched me. I could feel it the way his silver gaze measured every movement, every hesitation. Eat, Lysander said. His voice rumbled low, not unkind, but laced with command. I lifted my fork, my hand steady, despite the heat rising in my chest. I took a bite, chewing slowly, refusing to let him see how foreign it felt to sit across from him like this, like some parody of a marriage. You look at the food, he said after a moment, as if it's poisoned. Isn't it? I asked, the words slipping free before I could stop them. A silence followed. I braced myself for rebuke, for his anger. But instead, his mouth curved not in amusement, but something sharper. If I wanted you dead, Kestrel, I would not waste good venison on you. It's comforting, I murmured, setting the fork down. Though perhaps poison would be kinder than this. His brows rose, a flicker of surprise breaking through the polished mask. This? Being paraded as mate to a man I barely know, I said, my voice firm now, sharper than the cutlery between us. Being called traitor by my people, spy by your council, and claimed by you without a single word of my own. Tell me, your majesty, what is this, if not another kind of prison? His gaze darkened. You think yourself a prisoner here, aren't I? I leaned forward, refusing to let fear silence me. You said I was not hostage, not spy, but what am I truly, Lysander? A queen? A trophy? A piece on your board, moved where it pleases you. For a heartbeat, the air felt dangerous. His power pressed heavier, a storm about to break. I should have lowered my eyes. Should have bent, submitted, begged forgiveness. That's what every instinct screamed. Instead, I held his gaze, and for the first time, I saw at the faintest flicker of something in his eyes. Not rage, not disdain, respect. You are bold, he said finally, his voice quieter now. Most Omegas in your place would have broken by now. Then perhaps I am not most Omegas. The words slipped out, sharp as steel. My heart thundered, but I did not take them back. A pause. Then, to my shock, he laughed. Not a warm sound, but deep, harsh, real. No, you are not. The tension broke like a snapped cord. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the rest of the meal, the silence was different. No longer suffocating. Watchful, yes, but threaded with something else. Something alive. He asked no more questions, but his gaze lingered longer, as if memorizing the defiance he'd glimpsed. I ate more, my appetite returning, though every bite tasted of risk. When the plates were cleared and the hall emptied, he rose, towering as always, his presence filling the room. He paused beside me, close enough that the warmth of him seeped into my skin. You call this a prison, he said softly. But I wonder, how long before you realize the bars are not locked? My throat tightened. I wanted to snap back, to remind him that bars were bars, whether locked or not. But the words tangled with something else, curiosity, because for the first time, I wondered if he was right. He left then, leaving me alone in the echoing hall. But the silence no longer felt so heavy. That night, When I lay in the vast bed, I thought of his eyes when I had spoken without fear, the flicker I had seen, the laugh I had heard. And though I told myself I hated him still, a different truth whispered in the dark. For the first time since I entered this citadel, I had not felt like prey. For the first time, I had felt like something closer to equal. And that was more dangerous than chains. The council chamber smelled of smoke and steel, a place designed for judgment, not mercy. The elders sat in their semicircle of carved stone seats, their eyes sharp as blades. Behind them, the banners of the northern citadel swayed faintly in the draught, red and black against gray walls. And I stood at Lysander's side, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. They did not bother to hide their disdain. "She cannot be queen," Elder Corvin declared, his voice heavy with age, but sharp with conviction. "A concubine at best. A concubine is all she was meant to be." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some nodding in agreement, others glancing nervously toward Lysander. "She is an Omega," another added coldly, "a peace token dressed in silks. We cannot place such a one at the king's side as equal. It would insult every Alpha lineage who fought for centuries to build this kingdom." The word insult echoed like a slap. I kept my face still, though inside my chest burned. They spoke of me as though I were not there, as though my presence was nothing more than an object of trade flesh to warm the king's bed. Not a voice, not a mind, not a woman who had bled and lived and endured. My people had branded me traitor. The North branded me less than worthy. Everywhere I turned, it seemed, I belonged nowhere. But Lysander sat unmoved, his silver eyes fixed on the council. "Enough," he said, and the word thundered through the chamber. The murmurs died instantly. Corvin bristled. "We only speak for the stability of the realm, Your Majesty. The people will not accept her as queen." Lysander rose slowly, the weight of his presence filling the chamber until even the most hardened warriors lowered their eyes. He did not raise his voice, yet his words carried the finality of a storm breaking. "If she's mine," he said, "she rules beside me." The chamber froze. A pulse of power rolled off him, tangible, pressing against my skin. The declaration was not suggestion, it was law. She is not concubine. She is not bargaining chip. She is queen. Gasps rippled through the chamber, scandalized, fearful. Some elders looked as though they'd swallowed poison. Corvin surged to his feet, face blotched red. "You cannot. Do you question me?" Lysander's gaze cut to him, cold as a blade's edge. The elder's mouth snapped shut, but defiance still burned in his eyes. Others began to murmur again, voices low but urgent. "The Alphas will not accept this," one hissed. "The people will riot," praise. "The southern packs will use it as proof of his weakness," another warned. "Civil unrest will tear us apart." Their panic swirled, feeding on itself, a storm of resistance to the king's will. And through it all, I stood silent, my pulse hammering in my ears. He had spoken for me again, claimed me before them all. His words were shield and shackle at once. I was queen not because they saw me as such, not because I had proven myself worthy, but because he willed it. Yet when I looked at him, at the calm fury in his stance, I felt something unexpected. Not possession, not pity, but a strange kind of faith. He had defied them all for me. The thought was dizzying. Corvin broke the silence again, voice low but dangerous. "Your Majesty, if you persist in this, you will fracture the council. And if the council fractures, so too will the kingdom. Already the villages murmur against your decision. Already rival alphas whisper rebellion." Lysander did not flinch. "Let them whisper. Let them plot. They will find I do not break." He turned his head slightly then, his silver eyes meeting mine for the briefest moment. And though no words passed between us, the meaning struck like lightning. Do not bow, do not bend, stand with me. I lifted my chin. For the first time, I did not feel like an offering on display. I felt like a piece of iron being tested in the forge, pressured, heated, reshaped into something stronger. Still, as the council chamber emptied in tense silence, I could not ignore the truth. His defiance had drawn a line in blood. Some would follow, some would fight. The kingdom trembled on the edge of fracture, and I, an Omega, a peace offering, had become the spark in its center. It happened on a night heavy with silence. The royal wing was hushed, the braziers burning low, attendants dismissed. I had begun to grow used to the citadel's strange rhythm, the constant watch of guards, the echo of boots in endless corridors, the way the whole fortress seemed to breathe with the king's will. But that night, something felt off. I lay in the vast bed, staring at the ceiling carved with constellations I didn't recognize. Sleep would not come. My skin prickled with unease, the way it had in my village whenever wolves prowled too close to the border. Instinct whispered of danger. Then I heard it. Not the steady march of the king's soldiers, but the soft scrape of unfamiliar feet. I slipped from the bed, bare feet silent on the cold floor, and moved toward the balcony doors. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying scents I couldn't quite name, smoke, iron, and beneath it a memory of home. The bitter herbs of the southern villages, my kin. The doors burst open. Dark figures swept in, cloaked and masked, their blades glinting in the moonlight. Assassins, sent by those who had once called me daughter, neighbor, kin. End the humiliation, one hissed. End the treaty. I froze for only a heartbeat. Then instinct took over. I snatched the nearest thing. I could reach a heavy candlestick and swung it with all the strength I had. Brass. The crack of metal against bone startled even me. One assassin staggered back, blood dripping down his temple. Another lunged, blade flashing toward my chest. But a roar split the air. Lysander. He appeared from the adjoining chamber, like a storm breaking loose, his silver eyes burning with fury. He caught the assassin's wrist mid-strike, twisting until bone snapped. The man screamed, but Lysander silenced him with a single, brutal blow. More poured in 5, 6, maybe more. Too many for me to count. They swarmed him, blades flashing, teeth bared. I should have hidden. That's what every instinct screamed: cower, stay out of the way, let the king handle it. But I couldn't. Not when I saw the glint of a dagger arcing toward his back. I moved before I thought. My hand closed around another candlestick, and I hurled it with every ounce of desperation in me. It struck the attacker square in the temple, hard enough to make him stumble. It was enough for Lysander to whirl, his blade finding the man's throat in a single motion. He glanced at me then, just a flicker of silver eyes in the chaos. Surprise. And something else. Stay back, he growled. But I didn't. Another assassin lunged at me, his knife raised. I ducked, catching his arm between mine, the way the women in my village had taught each other to fight off raiders. I bit down hard on his wrist, tasting blood. He yelped, and I drove my knee into his gut, shoving him back toward Lysander, who finished him with terrifying precision. The chamber smelled of iron and blood, the floor slick with it. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I kept moving, kept fighting, refusing to let fear paralyze me. By the time the last assassin fell, silence returned thick and heavy, broken only by the crackle of dying flames. I stood trembling, chest heaving, blood smeared across my hands. My own blood? Theirs? I couldn't tell. Lysander wiped his blade on the cloak of a fallen man, then turned to me. For a moment, he only stared, his chest rising and falling. His expression was unreadable, his silver eyes bright in the firelight. "You saved me," he said finally. His voice was low, rougher than I had ever heard it. I I just reacted," I whispered. "No." He stepped closer, so close I could see the faint scar along his jaw, the lines of exhaustion hidden beneath the weight of his power. "Problem. You moved without hesitation. You fought. You risked yourself for me." I didn't know what to say. My legs threatened to give out beneath me, but I forced myself to stand tall. He reached out then, his blood-stained hand brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was warm, grounding, terrifying. "My mate," he said, "not as politics, not as performance, as truth." The words hit harder than any blade. Heat flooded my chest, sharp and confusing. I wanted to deny it, to push him away, to remind myself that I had been given here as sacrifice, not choice. But another truth lodged deep inside me. He had spoken it not as claim, but as recognition. For the first time, I wondered if I truly was a prisoner here, or if I had become something else entirely. The citadel was quieter after the assassin's blood had been scrubbed from the stones, but the silence carried weight. The kind of silence that waits, that presses at the edges of your thoughts until you can't ignore it anymore. I should have felt safe. The men who wanted me dead lay cold in the earth, yet I didn't feel safe at all, because the real danger was not the blades of assassins. It was the man who now walked at my side. That night, he led me not to the throne room, not to the council, but to his private chamber, a place I had not yet seen. The walls were hung with maps of the northern territories, the hearth glowing with low firelight. A wolf's pelt lay spread across the stone floor, its silver fur shimmering. The room smelled of smoke and pine, of steel and storm. Him. "Why?" I asked as soon as the door shut behind us. My voice cracked with exhaustion but carried the demand I could no longer silence. "Why claim me? Why protect me when your own counsel calls me a threat?" He turned, his silver eyes bright in the firelight, and for once he did not wear the mask of the untouchable king. His shoulders were heavy, his expression tired, as if carrying truths he had long kept hidden. "Because I saw you," he said. My breath caught. "Saw me?" "In visions." He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, like a wolf circling. "Long before you were brought here, before the treaty, I saw a woman with copper hair and a fire in her eyes. A queen standing at my side, her power different from mine, yet equal. She was the balance the kingdom needed." I stared at him, stunned. "You think I'm some prophecy?" "I don't think," he said, his voice low, firm. "I know." Heat rose in my chest, not from desire this time but from anger. "Do you realize what that sounds like? That I have no choice, no will of my own? That I'm just a pawn for your visions, for your counsel, for my people who threw me into your hands?" The words tumbled out, raw and jagged. "I was born into sacrifice, Lysander. First for my pack, then for your treaty, now for your visions. When do I become more than what everyone else decides I am?" The fire cracked, my voice shook, but I forced the words out, even if they broke me. "I don't want to be a pawn." Silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. I thought he would dismiss me, laugh at my defiance the way the council did. But instead, he closed the distance between us in 2 steps, his hand lifting hesitant, almost gentle, before brushing a tear I hadn't realized had slipped free. "You are not a pawn," he said quietly. "Not to me." I searched his eyes, silver catching gold in the firelight, and for the first time, I believed him. "You are the only one in this citadel who dares to defy me," he went on. "The only one who does not bow when the air itself demands it. Do you know what that means?" "What?" My voice was barely a whisper. That you are not beneath me. His fingers lingered at my jaw, warm, steady. You are beside me. The words hit deeper than any claim he had made before. Not as possession, not as shield, but as truth. Something broke open in me then. Something I had held locked behind walls of fear and anger. My body trembled, not with terror this time, but with the release of it. I leaned into his touch before I could stop myself, my lips parting on a shaky breath. His mouth was on mine, a heartbeat later. It was not gentle, not tentative. It was raw, fierce, the collision of two storms. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me closer as if he could anchor me to him. And God's help me. I let him. I wanted him. The kiss deepened, pulling the air from my lungs, leaving only heat and hunger and the pounding of my heart against his chest. I had thought I knew fire, but this was something else, something that burned without destroying. When we finally broke apart, our foreheads pressed together, his breath ragged against mine. You are not here because of visions, he said hoarsely. You are here because my wolf chose you, because I choose you. And in that moment, with his words tangled in mine, I felt it the first fragile thread of something dangerous and undeniable. Not chains, not treaty, not prophecy, bond. Real, raw, ours. The first warning came with the horns. Low and mournful, they echoed from the watchtowers of the citadel, rolling through stone and air like the growl of a beast too large to name. I was in the library when they sounded, my hand halfway across a page I could no longer see. Every muscle in my body stilled. The treaty had been fragile from the beginning, and now it was broken. By the time I reached the council chamber, the news had already spread. My pack my own blood was marching on the citadel. Hundreds of warriors advancing with banners flying, demanding either my return or my death. The chamber was alive with panic. Elders shouted over one another, their robes sweeping like wings, their voices sharp as blades. They will not stop until she is returned. Elder Corvin thundered. Our walls will not withstand a full siege. Then give her back, another snarled. His eyes cut toward me, filled with disgust. She is theirs by right. An Omega does not belong on the northern throne. She is the cause of this, a third said. Remove her, and the war dissolves. Their words struck like arrows, but I forced myself to keep my chin high. I would not let them see me falter. Still, inside, my chest was hollow. My people, the ones who had sent me here as offering, now came to drag me back or bury me in the snow. Lysander sat at the head of the chamber, unmoving, his silver eyes burning with quiet fury. He let them speak, let their panic claw at the air, until the noise reached its peak. Then he rose. The silence that followed was immediate, heavy. You would have me hand over my mate like cattle at market, he said, his voice low, each word carrying the weight of thunder. You would see me bow to Southerners who cannot keep their oaths. Your Majesty, Corvin said carefully, we speak only for the stability of the realm. Hundreds march on us now. The people will starve if we fall under siege. Better to cut away the rot than let the whole kingdom wither. Price. The word rot stung, but Lysander did not flinch. He stepped down from the dais, slow and deliberate, his presence filling the chamber until even the bravest of the council looked away. She is not rot, he said. She is not weakness. She is not ransom. His gaze swept across the room, silver burning. She is not theirs to claim. Then his eyes found mine, holding me steady, anchoring me in place as his final words fell like a blade. She is mine. The declaration rippled through the chamber, sharp as lightning splitting the sky. Some gasped, others hissed in outrage, but none dared speak against it. The weight of his power pressed too heavily, his dominance undeniable. My throat tightened. I had heard him call me mate before, but never like this. Not as politics, not as shield against whispers, but as truth before his council, as vow before his kingdom. You will not, Lysander continued, his voice rising now, hand my queen to wolves who cannot honor peace. You will not barter her life for your fear. If they march, let them march. They will learn what it means to challenge the North. The elders recoiled, some pale, others furious. Yet none dared move against him. The chamber emptied in silence, broken only by the sound of their robes dragging along stone. When the doors closed, it was just us. The fire in the hearth crackled, filling the heavy quiet. You defied them for me, I said at last, my voice unsteady. His silver eyes softened just slightly, but enough that I saw it. I would defy them 1,000 times more. I am not worth a war, I whispered. His steps closed the space between us. He lifted my chin with one scarred hand, forcing me to meet his gaze. You are worth kingdoms. The breath caught in my lungs. His words struck deeper than any wound, not because they were soft, but because they were absolute. Outside, the horn sounded again. My old pack was at the gates, their hatred marching closer with every step. But inside, for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. Because the Alpha King had drawn a line in blood and vow, and he had drawn it around me. I was not hostage, I was not pawn, I was not theirs, I was his. The battlefield was chaos. Snow churned to mud under 100 trampling boots. The clang of steel clashing with the roar of wolves in full shift. The air reeked of iron and smoke, of rage and fear. And through it all, the horns of war howled like dying beasts. I had never stood in the middle of battle before, never felt the ground shake with so much fury, never tasted the sharp metallic tang of blood in the wind. My heart hammered, each beat screaming the same warning, you will die here. Lysander fought at the front, a storm given flesh. His wolf half flickered with every strike, silver eyes burning bright, his blade carving through any who dared approach. He was terrifying, magnificent, and still, even he was only one against many. And they had come for me. Every glance from the enemy carried the same hunger, the same hatred. To them, I was no queen, no mate. I was a prize to reclaim, or a threat to silence. I should have cowered. That's what they expected of me, an Omega too weak to do more than cling to survival. But something inside me rebelled. I thought of the Council's whispers, of my pack calling me traitor, of assassins sent by my own blood to slit my throat. I thought of Lysander, standing unyielding against them all, declaring me his. And suddenly, I was no longer afraid. I was furious. The shift began like fire under my skin, searing every vein, every nerve. My body convulsed, breath stolen, vision burning white. Then release. My wolf tore free, not the small, fragile thing I had once feared to be. No, this wolf was larger, stronger, its fur glowing like copper fire beneath the sunday. My senses exploded outward, every scent sharp, every sound precise. I could hear the falter in enemy breaths, the crack in their courage. I could smell their lies, their fear. A howl ripped from my throat, wild and primal, shaking the air. The battle stilled for a heartbeat, eyes turned, gasps echoed. The Omega shifted? Someone choked. An Omega was never meant to shift. And yet, I stood on 4 legs, my claws sinking into snow, my power undeniable. I lunged. The first warrior didn't even raise his shield before I bowled him over, teeth sinking into his shoulder. The copper tang of blood filled my mouth as I hurled him aside, his cry breaking enemy ranks. Another charged me. I ducked, slashing across his belly with claws that glowed faintly, sparks of power trailing. Every strike was instinct, every motion guided by something deeper than thought. My wolf knew what to do. It had always known. And with each move, I felt Lysander's gaze. Not shock, not fear, but recognition. Together, we tore through the battlefield, his blade and my claws weaving destruction side by side. For the first time, I understood what it meant to fight not as prisoner or pawn, but as equal. The tide shifted. My people, my former pack, hesitated. Their certainty cracked. The whispers grew. Omega Wolf, Queen. Then the moment came. Lysander fell to his knees, staggered by a strike to his chest. I felt his pain as if it were my own, sharp and unbearable. A cry ripped from my throat as I leapt to his side, standing over him, snarling at all who dared come close. Blood dripped from his lips, but his eyes gods, his eyes were locked on mine, silver and molten gold, burning with something fierce, something final. Kestrel, he rasped, his voice breaking past blood and fury. Now, I understood. I shifted back, body shuddering with the effort, skin slick with sweat. Kneeling beside him, I pressed my mouth to his neck, my teeth grazing the pulse that thundered there. His hand tangled in my hair, steadying me, guiding me. And then I bit. The mark seared into existence, hot and binding, a bond of blood and vow. The crowd gasped, both armies watching as the impossible happened. His answering snarl was not pain, but triumph. In one motion, he turned, his fangs sinking into the curve of my neck. Fire shot through me, but it wasn't agony, it was completion. The bond snapped into place like lightning. I felt him, his power, his rage, his devotion flood into me, and I knew he felt mine, my defiance, my strength, my choice. We rose together, mate and mate, king and queen. The armies fell silent. Wolves who moments before sought my death now trembled, their heads bowing instinctively. For they saw not just a king, not just an alpha. They saw his equal, an Omega Wolf marked and bound, unbreakable. She is mine, Lysander thundered, voice carrying across the battlefield. His arm wrapped around me, pulling me close, our bond blazing bright. And I am hers. Together, we are unchallenged, Prosopis. The war ended not with blood, but with silence, with awe. Because in front of both armies, we had sealed something greater than victory. We had sealed eternity. When the dust of battle settled, the snow was red. The invading pack that had once called me their own stood scattered across the valley, their banners torn, their warriors kneeling in shame. They had not expected resistance. They had not expected to face me. They had come for a pawn, a bargaining chip, a girl meant to be bartered between kingdoms. What they found was a wolf blazing with power, standing at the Alpha King's side. Their howls of rage had faded into silence. Their lines had broken, shame hollowing out their defiance. And then, slowly, like a tide retreating from the shore, they withdrew. Not because their swords were gone, but because their pride was. Humiliation was sharper than any blade. I stood on the battlefield, my breath still ragged, my wolf's power humming through my skin like a second heartbeat. Around us, warriors of the north bowed their heads, not to Lysander alone, but to me. The thought made my chest ache. Only days ago, I had been nothing but an offering wrapped in fear. Now the eyes of two packs watched me with awe. Lysander's hand found mine. His palm was rough, scarred, and still blood-stained, but his grip was steady, grounding me in the whirlwind. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" My voice trembled despite myself. He turned, his silver eyes sweeping over both armies, my former kin, his warriors, council elders hovering at the edges. All of them. every soul who had doubted me. For truth, he said. Then he led me forward, up the steps of a ruined dais that once bore the banners of northern kings. The wind tore at my hair, scattering copper strands across my face, but I did not look away from the sea of eyes below. Lysander's voice carried like thunder. Pi, you sent her to me as sacrifice, he said to the southern pack. Coined, as if she were coin to be spent, a body to appease your fear. His tone sharpened, like a blade against whetstone. Pawn. But tonight she fought beside me. Tonight she revealed her truth. She is no prisoner. She is no pawn. She is no offering. His hand tightened on mine, and for the first time, he smiled not the sharp, cruel smirk of a king on the hunt, but something warmer. Something that felt like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. She is my equal. She is my mate. And before all gathered here, I name her what she was always meant to be, queen. The word rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. But none could deny what they had seen on the battlefield. The Omega Wolf who had shifted, who had turned the tide, who had stood unbroken when others had fallen. My heart pounded as Lysander released my hand only to reach for the circlet carried by Commander Thorn. A crown of black iron veined with silver, heavy with history. When he placed it on my head, I felt the weight of it, not just metal, but the burden of legacy, of expectation. Yet beneath it, I also felt the bond humming between us, steady and unshakable, his power braided with mine, his strength woven through my defiance. The soldiers of the North roared their approval, howls rising like a storm. Even among the Southerners, some bowed their heads, their gazes no longer filled with hatred, but with something closer to reluctant respect. I drew a breath, lifting my chin, and for the first time, I spoke not as offering or prisoner, but as queen. I was sent here as sacrifice, I said, my voice carrying across the blood-stained snow, as a token of fear, as a thing to be discarded, but no more. Today, I stand not as yours to claim, not as yours to kill. I stand as queen beside the Alpha King, power. And together, we will rebuild a world where no one Alpha, Omega, or anything between will be bartered like spoils of war. The silence that followed was sharp, but it was not disbelief. It was the silence of change, of walls breaking, of old chains rusting into dust. Lysander's arms circled my waist, drawing me close. His silver eyes glowed, not just with dominance, but with pride. And in that moment, I knew the truth. I had been sent to the Citadel to end wars. Instead, I had begun something greater. Sent as a peace offering, I became the queen who remade their world.